look at your morning. You see, my mornings, I like a certain amount of variety. I like this style with which sometimes God prepares the day for me. Like cloud cover today. It's almost like a blanket that seems to hold the heat in. That when I look out the window, I think, looks cold. That is, if I remember the winter. But since yesterday was hot, I know that looking out the window, when there's cloud cover, it's going to be kind of like a warm blanket that just seems to cover the earth. And underneath it, a little warm. And so you may be running your air conditioning or your fans or opening windows and doors and getting everything all cooled down. Because you know that, especially in Utah, those clouds aren't going to last too long before it gets hot again. Now I like looking at the weather and adjusting my day sort of to what the weatherman says. Now I appreciate what he says is going to happen, but I don't trust completely in what he hopes or plans or thinks will happen based upon what he's accumulated as far as the evidence is concerned. He can only deal with the circumstances of what has happened before, what might happen again, and putting two and two together projects an analysis or an idea of what he thinks the weather will be today. And for the most part, it's pretty good. You know, it keeps close to what the weather will be like. But there's still surprises that happen. Like last night, we had an unbelievable windstorm come up and just blow like crazy. And that's kind of what I figured out last year a little bit before, or as I lived here for a short period of time during the summer, was that there were surprises. There was a lot of wind, more so than I would have expected living here in Woods Cross and Bountiful. And as I discovered that, I realized I couldn't put out things, that were susceptible to the wind. I had to change my lifestyle somewhat to accommodate the weather. And that's often what we do when we're Christians. We have to accommodate, or we have to change our ways in order to accommodate God. A lot of people, pretty much, when they get saved, think that that's it, and they go off on their way. That God doesn't seem that personal. God doesn't feel that real. Oh, sure, I feel that way when I'm with other Christians, but when I'm by myself, I pretty much can do my own thing. At least, that's the way it feels, until suddenly the weather changes, and you no longer have that peace of God, or you no longer have that loving feeling, or suddenly you don't have that joy of your salvation. And when those things begin to happen, it gets a little cold. You kind of wonder, well, maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to change my ways. Maybe there's something wrong with what I've been doing, that I need to adjust my lifestyle and make it more conformable or more adaptable to what seems to be the circumstances of my life. That's what the weather is like in Utah. It changes regularly. Jesus said it this way, the wind bloweth whither it will. You neither know where it's coming from nor where it's going. So too is everyone led by the Spirit of God. If your life is a complete predictability, I would question what your relationship with God is like. If your life is so set in His ways that nothing ever upsets your apple cart, I debate with you whether or not you're actually genuinely a Christian. If everything seems to be going smooth sailing, then I got news for you. You probably are being ignored by God, and He's letting you have your way because one day you're going to discover it wasn't really the way God wanted your life to go. So, having things change and having things develop and having to adapt to life is part of what God's plan is for your life. It's not about getting all the good and leaving out the freedom. It's not about having freedom and not having the responsibility of being subject to an authority, which is God. And because you're subject to God, God places authorities here on earth that you have to be subject to. So your life isn't only about you and what you get, but it's about what God can do and what you're willing to give back to Him as a acceptable trade-off, so to speak, as a living sacrifice, we call it in Christianese words. But it's not about you getting what you want. Sometimes God says no. And that brings me to a point that's real interesting. Can you say no? Seriously, can you say no? Most people I know, play on the words no, most people I have seen in life can't say no. They either can't say no to their selves, or they can't say no to their grandchildren, or they can't say no to their children, or they can't say no to their spouse, or they can't say no to their lust, or they can't say no to something in their life. They just can't say no. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And one of the things my wife learned very early on when we got together in our relationship, and we became one flesh, one spirit, one soul in Jesus later in life. We haven't been married like 40 years like some people, but we've been married for a certain amount of time. And one of the things that we discovered about each other was that if I say no, I mean no. And I may change my mind, but at the time that I say no, there's no question about my no. And she couldn't say no when I first met her. She would say maybe, or I don't think so, or, a lot of ways that human beings in their relationship and in their conversation use certain words to never say the definitive no. Now, when I grew up as a young Christian, I had a guy that taught me how to say no. His name was Romaine. Because I had been in boot camp, he reminded me of boot camp because he was a Marine Corps drill instructor. And in boot camp, you learn that no means no, and that there's no back talk, negotiation, confrontation, or any other realization except for no is no. And you just accept it straight without any flinching or without any altercations whatsoever. You just accept that no meant no. And one of the things that I did with my nieces and nephews is something that used to freak out a lot of people when I would tell them. I would watch my little nieces and nephews doing something that I knew they shouldn't be doing. They knew they shouldn't be doing. So I would watch them and wait for the right moment. And it always came because God would use it. And what I would do is that I would wait and watch them, and I would give them a nightmare that would never end for the rest of their life. They would find out I meant no. And I would watch what they were doing, and as soon as they were in the right moment at the right time, at the top of my lungs, in as deep a voice as possible, I would scream with all my strength, no. And every one of them, nieces and nephews, would jump straight up like a cat that had just been barked at, come back down, sit down, and cry like a little baby, which is okay because they were pretty young at the time. And I would go over, and I would, get ready to pick them up. They didn't want to have anything to do with me at the time. But, they would go running back to their mom or their dad, and have that traumatic experience. But the thing that I found when they grew up was that they never forgot. They remember no. And if I said no to them, they looked at me twice. But they always obeyed whatever I said. I never had to say no again. I never had to enforce it with negotiations. I never had to swat them. I never had to, change my way of approaching them. Whenever I said no, they knew I meant it. And I never used it or abused it after doing that once. But they knew, because I had said no in such a forceful, strong, adamant way, based upon their experience of running into that no, they never did it again. And that was what was interesting that I found about letting your yes be yes and your no be no. So when I met my wife, I I realized that she had gone through previous experiences where she liked to, give people things. She liked to be the yes person, or to be the person that would give in or give up her own personal rights and privileges as a human being so that someone else could be happy. She was a giver, not a taker. And a lot of people think that the world is full of givers and takers. Well, there's more to life than duality. Whenever you get people that are stuck in this kind of like duality thing, it's a mind game that Satan puts on your blinders, to make you think that it's always left or right, yes or no, up or down. I mean, it's a real limited way of looking at life. But with my wife, it was more of her want to please, and her desire to please, and her desire to love and be loved was mistaken and wrapped up in wanting to give that with which the person desired in order to receive back either gratitude or love or affection or, acceptance or communion or fellowship of some type, where she would be accepted as that person that had been loved and given love by not saying no. I changed that. God used me in a way she can say no problem today. And she can still love, and she is loved, and she feels love, and she has been loved, and she knows love. But she knows it in a different way than she knew it before. It's up to her to say whether she thinks it's a better way or not, but I believe that God has blessed her in such a way that she knows what genuine love from God is. Now, that may not necessarily be because I said no, but the point is, she knows how to say no now. And having grandchildren and growing up now that are growing up, I'm glad, because I think that a lot of her lifestyle has changed by having that ability to be self-disciplined. And self-discipline is simply the idea of you have to teach yourself how to say no so that you can appreciate yourself when you say yes. In other words, if you've never said no, your yes doesn't mean anything at all. It's worthless and it's meaningless, because of course someone's going to get what they want from you because you don't know how to say no. But once you've said no, then people are surprised by you having the ability and the strength to stand on your principles or your belief or your truth, that your words mean something. And the only way your words ever mean something isn't by yes, but really by no. And so that's why James says, count it all joy when you fall into divers trials and tribulations. Because it's not counting it all joy because you're counting 1, 2, 3, and you're trying to survive by counting to 10 and not blowing up. No, he means that when you're counting it, you're looking at it and appreciating it and realizing what it is accomplishing in you. In other words, there's things in life that God is going to change in you, that the only way he can change it in you is by telling you no, as opposed to telling you yes. Some people like to say, well, all the promises of God are yes. I mean, they use scriptures out of context and disproportionately in order to get what they want from God. Sometimes they do that with people and with human beings. They'll manipulate, or they'll change the circumstances, or they'll rearrange life to try to say, well, you can't spank your child because that's evil, or you can't say no to a child because you're going to damage them psychologically, or you can't do this or do that, or come up with whatever circumstances. They create these fallacies, these false ideas that when they string them together make it sound like you're in the wrong. But if you took it apart piece by piece, you'd find that even though 6 of those things that are 7 may seem right, that 7th one that's wrong makes it all wrong. In other words, with God, it's all righteousness or it is sin. It's 100% bullseye or it's not at all. You miss the mark. And that's what the point of it is that with our relationship with God, we do miss the mark. we don't always keep our no being no or our yes being yes unless we learn to do those things gradually as God says no to us. So today, in looking in His Word, wow, let me change my glasses so that I can look in His Word. But sometimes, God has to say no to us. I mean, we're just so selfish and so self-centered, and little do we self-sacrifice that we only learn self-discipline by God telling us no. I am with you to save you. Shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captive delivered? But thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contends with thee. And all flesh shall know that I, the Lord, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Fear thou not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen you. Yea, I will help you. Yea, I will uphold you with my right hand of my righteousness. We have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. In that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to succor or to help them that are tempted. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. It's discouraging sometimes, I know, to be told no. It's frustrating at times to see people that are prosperous or worldly or carnal Christians. Boy, do carnal Christians drive me crazy. And most of them are people I grew up with. But to see carnal Christians getting into the world and becoming of the world and becoming with the world, accumulating goods, accumulating wealth and prosperity, accumulating all these things that maybe you don't get because God has told you no. Because God hasn't let you have all those things like, the Harleys or the Christian cruises or the Bible schools or all these other things that you wanted all your life. And God has said no to you. Well, God has something more excellent for you. They have received their reward now, but you'll receive your reward later. And I know that's not comforting, because I'm one of those people. I have not gotten to go to Bible college like I wanted to. I'm not in some, what they would call a normal recognized ministry, though I got to admit, this is bigger than anything I ever dreamed of. 10,000 people, I mean, come on now. It's ridiculous. But, nothing I ever would have dreamed of the way that I would have dreamed of it. But God has chosen to use the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. So being foolish, I'm used in a way outside the church that ministers inside the church to a greater degree than what the church may be reaching in some places at some point in time. But there are lots of people out there that really, they look like they got it all. They got the money, they got the wealth, they got the health, they got all these things going for them. But that is their reward. They're not going to get anything more. Jesus said it this way. You're going to appreciate that penny you get for your service. But that person who's wealthy isn't going to be happy when they get to heaven and the only thing they get is a penny. The parable is true. What you're going to receive from God isn't what you think it is. And a lot of people have gotten a wrong idea about their riches and their rewards in heaven. Dare say, the one thing that you can count on is that if Jesus is enough, Jesus will be your satisfaction when you get to heaven. But if you think that you're going to get more than what you've already gotten, and you are a wealthy Christian, and that you've gotten into the world, you're not going to be satisfied with less, because you're going to want more. And the only thing you're going to get more of in heaven is God, not possessions. So if anything, if you can dispossess yourself of the possessions of the world now, you won't feel that longing for the world and looking back. should you happen to be raptured. Because the problem with Lot's wife wasn't that she was not obeying Abraham, or Lot, and the angel. The problem with Lot's wife was that she had so much that she gave up, that she looked back and wanted it to take it with her. You won't. So, don't be jealous of, those wealthy Christians. And I see a lot of them. God knows I'm frustrated with them. I even get aggravated at times because I want some of what they got. I know they got Harleys, and I know they got bikers, and I know they got this, that, and the other thing, and they say, well, it's because God blessed us. Well, I don't think so. I think God blessed you so that you could give it away, but that's between you and the Lord. If you find that, God just blessed you because you got all your reward now, praise the Lord. I'm counting on one thing from the Lord, and that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever, but not just that, because I've done that already, and I enjoy it, and I love it, but that I can go somewhere in the millennium, 1,000 years, of peace, and I could camp out under a tree, and I'll have a little, mini garden, a vineyard, of my own, with a tree of my own, with a little creek of my own, a little river, and a little pond of my own where I can go swimming, and I can drink from the waters, and I can eat from the fruit of the vine, and I can sit under the shade of the tree, and I'll be satisfied to sit there for 1,000 years, doing nothing really, except for enjoying the presence of the Lord as He comes and visits me, and I go and visit Him 3 times a year in Jerusalem. I'll be thrilled with that. So if you're looking for me, I'm not in Hawaii. I'm not messed up, thinking that the world's going to look like the way it is today. It's going to be a mess, and then it'll get cleaned up. But sitting in Israel in the 1,000-year reign of Jesus coming back to the earth, hey, I'll be thrilled with just a little plot of land, tiny land, a little garden that I can grow plants on, a chance to talk to them, like this guy that's getting ready to bloom. Go for it, dude. Chill. Man, it's cool. But the reality of what some people have today, they got back in the world. Don't be that way. Let God tell you no, and accept His no as no.